The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
Welcome from the General Assembly and the City of Richmond. I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports and Cox Communications. And a very warm welcome to Senator Chap Petersen. Thank you for being here, sir.
Woody, thank you for having me.
Well, I think we've got about 32 days left in this 45-day session. I think about 2,000 bills have been introduced, and I know you've been very, very busy.
I have, Woody. I've put in about 20 pieces of legislation, probably more ambitious than I deserve, but there's just so many ideas out there and a lot to accomplish in 2013.
Well, let's talk about one of your bills right off the bat that has been described as asinine and stupid. It's your Dooring bill.
Yes,
Tell
sir.
us about it.
Well, it's a bill that was brought to me by the bicyclist community, mainly in the city of Richmond, but statewide. And it has to do with the concept of people opening their car doors into bike lanes. In the city of Richmond and in other communities, there are bike lanes which run parallel to the drive lanes on our public streets. And when people parallel park, they park next to the bike lanes, which is fine. That's completely legal. But when you open your car door, oftentimes you're opening the door right into the path of an oncoming cyclist. And there have been numerous incidents of cyclists that have had a car door open right in front of them, no opportunity to stop. They hit the door, they fall head first over the window, and in some cases have been badly injured. And so I brought the bill, which simply says that before you open a car door, you need to look and just make sure it's safe to do so. And I got some pushback from people that thought that was a bad idea, stupid idea, but I think if they look at the bill, it's limited to situations where the door opens onto oncoming traffic, and it is a safety measure, and it did pass committee.
Great. So it'll be on the Senate floor sometime soon, I take it.
I think it'll be on the Senate floor tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to some theatrics. I'm sure some people will describe it as the end of Western civilization if we pass the bill, but hopefully we'll get it done, and I think all it will really mean is that people will be aware that there are cyclists out there using these lanes.
Absolutely. Well, sticking to transportation, the governor in his State of the Commonwealth came out with a pretty bold plan that would have Virginia do away with the 17.5 cent gas tax. It would be the first state in the nation to do that. There are a lot of moving parts there, but tell us what your initial reaction to his proposal is.
I think it's crazy. I mean, it's kind of like saying you're going to improve highway safety by doing away with the state police. You know, the gas tax since the 1920s has financed our highways, and it has fallen behind the times really for the reason that we haven't indexed it. We've had it capped at 17.5 cents per gallon, and that, of course, made sense back when, you know, gas was 75 cents a gallon when I was a kid. Now it's $3.25 a gallon. So if we had had it on a percentage basis like we do with every other retail commodity, the money would be there for the highways and roads. And so it's simply captive to this mechanism whereby, again, it's 17.5 cents per gallon. If it was a percentage or if it was indexed, we wouldn't be in this situation. And that's a very easily solved problem. And I have a bill that indexes. I have another bill that basically has an across-the-board reform to transportation. So the governor's plan, I think it was designed to get high headlines. Maybe it did, but I don't think it's a serious attempt to solve a problem. Well,
tell us a little bit about the proposals that you have introduced, starting with the fuel index.
Right. Well, my initial bill is really sort of an omnibus transportation bill, and it's similar to other bills that have been put in by Senator Watkins and Senator Saslaw, in that what it does is it takes the 17.5 cents and pushes that up to 27.5 cents, which would essentially represent the indexing we should have done back probably 20 years ago. And that makes up about $500 million new dollars in revenue. And then it indexes it going forward. So to the extent we have more travel on our highways and more fuel efficiency, then we'll still be able to capture enough revenue to fix the highways. The third piece, and this is a little bit different, perhaps more controversial, is it also reforms the Commonwealth Transportation Board. That's the board that actually decides how we spend this money. So we have about $5 billion annually which we distribute for road construction or road maintenance. That money is distributed by the CTB. The CTB is made up of members from various parts of Virginia, but Eastern Virginia, specifically Hampton Roads and Northern Virginia, is undercounted. So my bill would give more representation, and that to me is a key part of any reform.
Well, tell us why these proposals are floating around. It seems like Groundhog Day. I mean, we've been talking about transportation reform for years.
Well, you know, it's funny. Back in 2004, when Governor Mark Warner introduced his tax reform bill, and there was a Senate companion, we had about a 6-week long session stalemate about what to do. And at that time, I went to the Speaker and said, you know, what we really ought to do is increase the gas tax, because I think that's a missing piece. And I had a bill in that would have increased the gas tax at that point by 6 cents to 23.5 and raised about $300 million new dollars. And he said to me, he's like, well, normally your bill would make sense, but have you seen the way prices have increased? And I said, no. And he said, well, it just reached $1.65 a gallon in Fredericksburg. And that was supposed to be high. And again, you know, because we didn't move forward on this issue, we've gotten trapped. And people have come up with various ways to try and solve it. Tim Kaine had ideas. You know, lots of people have had ideas. We had the referendum 10 years ago, which were defeated. By and large, it's been a lot of people have wanted to use the retail sales tax. Remember, the citizens rejected that approach in 2002, and I don't really think it's improved since then.
And of course, doing away with the gas tax has an immediate impact on those who traverse the Commonwealth but who do not reside here.
Well, that's, of course, the great beneficiaries would be people that drive through the Commonwealth but don't file an income tax here or don't buy their groceries here, because they will essentially become free riders, literally, on our highway system.
And there's no guarantee that if the governor's proposal becomes law that we will see a 17.5% decrease in terms of our fuel costs.
I would be willing to bet a year's salary that we would not see that decrease. There's a lot of inputs into the price of gasoline, but the price is, at the end of the day, marked to the market. And whatever the market bears, that's where it's going to be priced. And particularly in my area in Northern Virginia, the price in Virginia will always be within a reasonable approximation of the price in D.C. and Maryland.
And in terms of these additional fees, I think there's an additional $15 a year registration fee.
Right.
And there's another fee that attempts to capture some additional monies from those who use alternative fuel vehicles.
Right. It's the old theory of no good deed goes unpunished. For years, we've wanted people to buy hybrids. We've given them specialized treatment, allowing them to drive on our HOV lanes. And maybe we encourage them too much. Now there's so many hybrids. There's about 90,000 licensed hybrids out there now, out of a population of about 7 million cars. But it was good. I mean, we accomplished what we wanted, which was getting people to buy more efficient vehicles, become less reliant on foreign petroleum. And now we're going the exact opposite way. We're penalizing people for buying these cars.
Now, what about some of these public-private partnerships that have grown up over the past few years? And we do see new construction going on. I take it that's from money the state borrowed and then used that to leverage with a private entity? Yeah,
well, what we did was in 2011, I believe it was, we passed a very large bonding bill. And we sold about $3 billion in bonds, and most of that money went for projects, which were improvement projects, and I had several in my area. For example, if you're driving on the county parkway and now you have that grade-separated interchange with Fair Lakes Parkway, which was a huge convenience, a lot of that money came from the 2011 bond that we passed. The problem is we've sort of spent all that money up front, and now we got to pay the bonds off, and if we don't raise more revenue, it's going to come right out of traditional funding sources like the general fund, because we just don't have enough revenue to support those bonds right now.
And a number of them involve tolls that will be assessed.
Well, now I haven't even mentioned the hot lanes, for example. Yes. We have the hot lanes project on the Beltway in Northern Virginia, which was implemented in November 2012, and now you can drive around the hot lanes, and you can, for essentially what is a $1.50 or $1 fee, you can bypass the traffic around Tyson's. And it's very convenient. I don't know if it's making money. It's owned by a private entity. But by and large, I think that's the type of project that's worked well. It's not going to work everywhere. I mean, in Northern Virginia, we have the traffic to sustain that model, but that will always be part of the solution.
Now, I think you're also carrying a constitutional amendment dealing with the restoration of voting rights.
Yes, sir.
And of course, that was a huge applause line that the governor received during his address in terms of the state of the Commonwealth, but it bit the dust pretty quick on the House side. What's going on the Senate side?
Well, it was an applause line for the governor. I tip my hat to the governor because he, in my opinion, has really made some great strides in terms of restoring rights and having an efficient process. What this would do would be an automatic restoration. So people that serve their time and then go through probation and get back not just out of jail or out of prison, but they're actually clear their probationary period, that they can have their rights restored. And I support the governor's 100%. I had a bill which I then amended so it could conform with the governor's proposal. It's actually being carried by Louise Lucas of Portsmouth right now on the Senate side. It tied 3-3 in subcommittee. It will go to the full committee for a report. I'm hoping we can get it out of the Senate. Once it goes to the House, that's out of my hands. The governor's going to have to intercede and really tell people in the House subcommittee, look, I now start supporting this initiative. It's in your hands. At least let the full House have a vote on it.
So what's the nature of the opposition in terms of the merits or the pros and the cons? Or
the articulated opposition or
yes,
the substantive opposition? I think the articulated opposition is, well, people commit a felony and there ought to be a price for that, and part of the price is they can't vote. And that's just part of their punishment, and it is what it is. I think the substantive opposition is, if ex-felons start voting, that could be a large voting bloc, probably in excess of 100,000 people in a Commonwealth of 8 million people, and that could tip the difference in elections.
And right now, as a matter of constitutional law in the Commonwealth, that authority rests solely within the executive, the governor.
Right, and one of the points I've made is every governor thus far has set up a different system for restoring felon voting rights, but there's nothing to stop a governor from saying, you know what, I'm going to move forward, and if I'm elected governor, I'm going to set up a system which essentially automatically restores if someone goes in for a driver's license. All they have to, and they pop up as a felon, and they just have to sign on the dotted line that they want their voting rights back. So in a way, if we do pass this constitutional amendment, we can clarify the process, which would allow automatic restoration in some circumstances, for example, nonviolent offenders, but B, allow the General Assembly also to control the conditions. Otherwise, there's going to be a governor one day who's going to wake up and say, you know what, I'm going to run on this issue, and if I'm elected, I'm going to say to people, if you come in and get your driver's license and you've been adjudicated a felon and served your time, sign on the dotted line, you're going to get it restored.
Has there been any concern expressed about the definition of a nonviolent felon?
Always concerned about that. That's sort of the eye of the beholder. My take on it would a violent felon is someone he himself has committed an assault on somebody, as opposed to someone that, say, was operating in an enterprise. But that will be something that, again, would be subject to definition by the General Assembly.
Turning to business-related matters, I know that you also have a bill in dealing with tax credits.
Yes,
now,
sir.
Tax credits are there to encourage businesses to invest, but apparently no one knows whether those tax credits are actually bringing what is needed to justify them.
Right. That's my other constitutional amendment, and this has to do with what I call the 5-year sunset concept, and that is we have in Virginia dozens of tax credits, and most of them have an industrial focus. It's either a tax credit for a manufacturing concern or the shipbuilding industry or coal mining, and the idea is we allow them certain payments in lieu of taxes. Maybe it's for worker retraining, maybe it's for investments in capital equipment, and that's all great, and I'm sure it was a great idea when it was put on the books maybe in the 70s or the 80s. The problem is there's no accountability. We don't know if these tax credits work. We don't know if people are actually being hired. We don't know if these industries are making the right investments. And so what my bill or my resolution would do is every tax credit would have to come back every 5 years in order to be reauthorized. And what's important about that is those that have the metrics that show that they're working, hey, we're going to reauthorize those because we don't want to put people out of work. But if there are not metrics, if no one's tracking it, if nobody cares, if it's just sort of on the books and being used as a tax shelter, then we're not going to reauthorize it. And right now, there's about $2 billion a year that we lose in tax credits, and there's no accountability for it. And there's no government spending program that works that way.
So $2 billion in tax credits that we're losing every year, and no one knows where that's going or how effective those credits are.
That's the current system.
Wow, wow. Uranium mining is another issue that's before the General Assembly. It was here last year, as I recall, and I guess there's an attempt to lift the moratorium on uranium mining and put some type of regulatory regime in place,
right,
in order to allow mining to occur.
Right. Yes, we will have a bill on uranium mining. It will come through the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, which I sit on. I'm expecting a battle royale. It's a huge issue in Southside Virginia, and it's really an important issue statewide because if we did permit uranium mining, A, it would eventually, I assume, would become a large job driver in Southside, but B, the environmental effects would be profound and would obviously reach not just to Southside, but also Hampton Roads and other places where there are water sources in that watershed.
And I know you've been a leader and an advocate in terms of environmental matters, especially as that relates to buildings, especially state office buildings. Yep. What's going on in that regard?
Well, last year we passed my bill, which mandates that all state buildings have to be built according to LEED Enterprises LEED certification. And we got that bill passed. I want to thank the McDonnell administration for supporting that bill. So thank God that's in the rearview mirror. I think right now in the environmental community, and I've tried to sort of stay atop of the issues, one of the big issues is going to be renewables. We've had a requirement since 2007 that our utilities invest in renewables, which is solar, wind, biomass, things of that nature. And to date, that law has been unsuccessful. We have not developed a renewables industry. Instead, what we've done is our utilities have bought credits from out-of-state renewables and basically pumped them through the rate base. So our ratepayers pay for them, but we don't create any jobs in Virginia.
And I understand some of the CEOs have received fairly significant bonuses as a result of that.
I would be shocked to hear that. No, I'm not shocked to hear that. Well, right now it's all carrot, no stick. So I have a bill in that would basically take that renewable incentive and say it has to be a Virginia-based project which creates jobs in Virginia. You can't just go out on the market and buy what we call RECs, renewable energy credits, and then bring them into Virginia and, again, run them through the rate base with a bonus. It was funny, I had a meeting with Dominion today when we're taping this show, and I do think that they're trying to reach a resolution on it. They recognize there's a lot of unhappiness with the current law. What I'd like to do is see us keep some incentives on the book to try and bring in particularly wind and solar, because I think we have capacity there, especially wind, especially the Virginia Beach Offshore Wind Consortium. I think that's going to be a huge potential. It could be the largest wind project in the nation once it's done, because Virginia Beach has a lot of unique characteristics. So I want to make sure we preserve the incentives for that.
And of course, mental health. That has been one of the components of a debate that's going on not only nationally but locally around the Sandy Hook tragedy.
Yep.
And of course, Virginia is not a stranger to those tragedies witnessed Virginia Tech just a few years ago. But I know you have a bill relating to mental health and coordination.
I do. I have a bill that has come out of the Virginia Tech Commission, which studied mental health issues and other issues that led to the 2007 tragedy. And one of their recommendations was to have better coordination between community health services and our universities. And my bill, which I filed on Friday, would basically say that every university would have to have some type of memorandum of understanding with the local community service boards. The CSB treat addictions, they treat mental health commitments, they treat essentially all the issues of behavioral health and mental health issues. And my bill would simply say that if somebody was, say, for example, discharged from a mental institution or discharged from an addiction treatment institution, that information would be given to the university. In other words, it's not just put in a circular file somewhere and forgotten about, but the university becomes aware of this, that they have a plan in place to reintegrate that student back into the community, and just, again, be aware that this is a potential issue.
And as we speak, there are a lot of visitors upstairs today, gun rights advocates, those who oppose the brandishing of guns and those kinds of things. And of course, there has been some legislation introduced and passed on dealing with what's called the gun loophole, the gun show loophole.
Right.
Where does that stand now?
Well, I think those bills have already been, well, I don't know what the status is, but by and large, we have not passed a gun show loophole bill in Virginia. I think, you know, right now, if you or me goes to Walmart or Target, or not Target, but Walmart or, say, Dick's Sporting Goods and buys a gun, you got to go through a background check. It typically takes about 30 minutes to complete, and they check your name against the state police or the national database for convicted felons and spousal abusers and all those other folks. And if you go to a gun show, then you can buy privately, and obviously you don't have to go through all that. You have that option for a private purchase, and in a private purchase, that's unregulated. I think the Obama administration has attempted to put in legislation that would make even private sales subject to background checks, which that's a very large bill. The gun show bill is actually a lot smaller, and I think what the Senate passed on Friday, the Senate panel, is pretty narrow in scope, which simply says gun shows should be limited to licensed dealers. And I think no matter where you stand on the Second Amendment issue, I think you can recognize that in a commercial context like a gun show, everyone there should be a licensed dealer, and that just makes everybody more accountable and levels the playing field. Now, unfortunately, I'm not sure if that bill is going to make it to the floor, because I think the committee may have reversed, having voted for it Friday, they may have reversed on it today. As you mentioned, Woody, there are hundreds of people in the Capitol today on gun right issues, and hey, I'm happy. There are a lot of my constituents, and so I'm happy people are here to lobby. But those are some of the details.
Speaking of Washington again, we keep hearing about sequestration. I know you have a lot of federal employees in your district, and Northern Virginia is inundated with that. In addition to that, we have a lot of military installations in the Commonwealth that provide a lot of jobs, and sequestration would not only affect those military installations and federal employees, but also those mom and pop establishments that serve those military installations. There's very little you can do anything about that at the state level, but what do you see happening?
Well, I would start off by saying that of every third dollar in circulation in Virginia's economy starts with the federal government.
Every third dollar?
Every third dollar. And it comes from three sources. One is people that are actually on the federal payroll, either they're federal employees or military. That's a huge portion. Two is military contractors, money that comes through our economy through military procurement. I believe about, well, not just military, all kinds of federal procurement. I believe that's about a $40 billion a year industry in Virginia. It's easily our largest industry. And then the third is just the most obvious, Medicare, Medicaid, and other recipients of federal benefits. So if you look at those three, every third dollar comes from the federal government, and to the extent that the federal government is restricted in how they spend money or restricted in the commitments that they make, that has an immediate impact on Virginia. Now, I will say by nature, I'm an optimist, not a pessimist, and I think that the quality of our workforce in Virginia drives a lot of our job growth. And so to the extent the federal government's not creating jobs, I do believe that the private sector would step in and sort of take advantage of talented people to create jobs. But having said that, we don't really have a plan in place to deal with the types of federal cutbacks that they're talking about. If they do go to sequestration, we're looking at a mandatory $1 trillion cut in the federal budget, which would be phased in over 10 years. That's about over 10 years, about $100 billion a year. And I think we had done the metrics. It's probably about a $20,000 to $24,000 person annual loss in our workforce.
Wow. And the governor's federal contingency fund doesn't hold a candle to those kinds of numbers.
No, and I think, you know, I voted for the governor's federal contingency fund, but I don't really know what it could do other than hire a lobbyist on Capitol Hill. I mean, maybe that'll get you a couple billable hours. You know, at the end of the day, the U.S. Congress, they're going to do what they do, and the president got reelected. I think he needs a little bit of leeway in order to make choices. The Republicans obviously control the House of Representatives, just like they control the House of Delegates here. I respect that, but you know, at the end of the day, you can't have two captains. And the president got reelected. He was made pretty clear what he was running on, and so I think he needs a chance to implement those policies.
As a result of other action in Washington last year, the Affordable Care Act was upheld. It did give the states more flexibility in terms of Medicaid, and that's another issue facing the Commonwealth, Medicaid expansion.
Right, and the issue we will face this year is whether or not we're going to expand Medicaid to match what the federal government has requested that we do under the Affordable Care Act. And I support doing that. I mean, basically, the federal government has stipulated that they will pick up 100% of the cost for the first 3 years of the program, and then they go to 90% of the cost. So what we would do is expand our Medicaid eligibility so that people that are single adults, not married, not kids, would be eligible for Medicaid if they earn up to 138% of the federal poverty level. I think we've identified about 400,000 people in Virginia that don't currently have insurance that would qualify under that. And again, this is a chance to get people on a health insurance plan, Medicaid, what have you, and we want people to be on health insurance plans. We don't want them just walking into emergency rooms.
Now, what happens to those federal dollars if the Commonwealth decides not to expand Medicaid?
I think they go to the other 49 states, and that's part of it. I mean, these are tax dollars that we paid, you and I paid in federal income tax, and if we decide not to take it, it would be essentially the same as deciding I'm not going to take a bequest from my parents in their will, or I mean, we're basically walking away from money. And I understand, listen, if it was for me, I might choose to walk away from money, but I represent 200,000 people. I can't just walk away from money that could benefit them. You know, that's not what this is about.
And of course, finally, the state has made a decision in terms of allowing the federal government to run the exchange under the Affordable Care Act.
Right, and you know, I think a lot of Democrats would probably prefer the federal government model. Personally, and you know, I would prefer that Virginia we do our own model. That way we could have had citizen input, business input. Unfortunately, I think we lost that window.
Great. Well, thank you for being with us, Senator Chap Petersen. Good luck.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I am Woody Evans.